I want to tell you, we're really privileged to have the commanding general of Army Training and Doctrine Command, General Steve Townsend. A fabulous career, rich with lots of diversity. So again, as we kind of look at how we model our officer corps, he's a great representation of what we would expect from people. Time in the 75th Ranger Regiment, 101st, 82nd, commanded 10th Mountain Division, commanded 18th Airborne Corps. Obviously, you know, he was the CJTF commander in OIR, and really was at the center of our success in our partnership with the Iraqis in taking care of the problem with ISIS in Mosul. And I think he would tell you that the interesting thing about that is you never know where you're going to be in that time in history when you've got to step up. And as leaders, that's something important to remember. We were fortunate to have General Steve Townsend at the right place at the right time, and because of that, we're better off for it. So, sir, with no further ado, a North Georgia college grad at the time, right? So now it's University of North Georgia. But if you please welcome General Steve Townsend.
I was having dinner at the table here tonight. I was sitting with actually a cadet from now the university. They've gotten all highfalutin on me. It's not North Georgia College anymore. It's University of North Georgia. La-di-da. Okay, thank you, General Evans, for that introduction and for your invitation to speak to the future of our Army here tonight. Before I get started here, I'm gonna designate a question asker. What was your name again, Cadet?
Sir, Cadet Binning.
All right, Cadet Binning. So you're going to ask the first question to get the audience off to a good start. And what was your name?
Cadet Sean Johnson from Lincoln University.
Okay, so you're going to ask the second question, but you can't ask me the same question you asked me at the dinner table because that was too hard.
Roger, sir.
Okay, so you got to think of two questions because you can't say that she took your question when it's your turn. Okay, it's an honor to represent our Chief of Staff of the Army, General Mark Milley, here tonight to speak to all of you and recognize the top cadets from ROTC and West Point, top cadets in America. Cadets who exemplify the leadership attributes of General of the Army George C. Marshall and his commitment to our nation. My personal congratulations to all of you. You're off to a great start in your young careers. You've already made a pretty good mark, I'd say, and I'm confident that the next generation of Army senior leaders, the colonels and generals of our Army, and the Army senior civilians will come from this room right here. I saw your schedule this week. You've had some pretty good speakers and some pretty interesting topics. Don't leave those subjects behind when you return to your academic institutions. I want you to make lifelong learning a part of who you are. It will serve you well. And it will help ensure that you and the units that you will lead are ready for the challenges in the future in this ever-changing world. About 37 years ago, I sat right here where you're sitting. Not right here because we were in Virginia. This thing was in Virginia back in those days. And we actually used to hold this conference at VMI. Any VMI cadets in the room? One over here. We used to hold this at VMI where General Marshall was a graduate. I was like you, though. I was about to begin my Army career, and like you, I was wondering what the future held in store for me. So I was commissioned in the spring of 1982. Good God, that seems like a long time ago. And then it doesn't. Now, you might be sitting here thinking that 1982 has no relevance to you today. But in 1982, there was a Carnegie Mellon University computer scientist who invented the use of the thing called emoticons. You know them better as emojis. He invented them to communicate humor, sarcasm, and irony in email. And this is the first emoji right there. Now, we were pretty creative in 1982, so we quickly expanded our emoji library to this one. And then we were pretty much out of game for a while. So our emoji options were pretty thin. But to be fair, this is an example of the computers we had to work with in those days. You can see the person over there on the side. This computer filled an entire room, and it cost about $15 million in 1982, which I don't know, it's like a gazillion dollars now. The first unit I went to, the 1st Infantry Battalion I was in, had a word processing machine, one in the entire battalion. It sat in the S3 shop. Both of those computers, this one and that one in my 1st Battalion, are less powerful than the smartphone that almost all of you have in your pockets right now. Look at this. Computer on the left, the guts of your smartphone on the right. That's pretty amazing. It puts into perspective the pace and the potential for change over the course of your career. That's my career right there. 1982 on the left, today on the right. In 1982, we could not have anticipated this rapid pace of innovation and its impact on warfare. Your challenge is to think about how will change impact your future as an officer. What will fill this space on the right? What will that look like in the future? How will it change the way we fight? How will it change? How will our adversaries use it to their advantage? How will we use it? Now, the world in 1982 was, like today, a pretty dangerous place. But it was a little bit more predictable then than it is now. It was a bipolar world. We had the free world and communism. We had NATO and the Warsaw Pact. For the most part, the world was either aligned with us or against us. As you've heard this week, today's world, today and tomorrow, our Army must be prepared to be contested in all warfighting domains: air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace, during both competition and during armed conflict. We must prevail in competition in order to deter large-scale conflict, just like we did during the Cold War. We know how to do competition, and we know how to do it well. We defeated the Soviet Union during the Cold War. We whipped their ass. It took us 70 years to do it, but we did it, and we did it without ever having a major war with them. Those days are kind of back with us now. But if deterrence fails and armed conflict does come, the American people will expect us to be ready to fight and win. So here's my primary message to all of you tonight. Well-trained American soldiers, led by you, trusted and empowered through your leadership to act with disciplined initiative, is what provides our nation with the decisive advantage that we have. That disciplined initiative of the American service member is it's a capability that our adversaries cannot replicate. Our leadership philosophy of mission command unleashes our soldiers' grit, ingenuity, and disciplined initiative. It's the special sauce of the U.S. Army, and it's the only way to lead a winning army, and I'll talk more about it in a minute. Now, like I said, it's been about 37 years since I sat where you're sitting right now, and truth is, I don't recall a word the guest speaker said. I can't even remember who the guest speaker was. So, with that humble reminder of my true place in your life right now, I'm going to try to say something that I hope will stick with you for maybe the next year as you move out. I'm going to stop talking about highfalutin things like multi-domain operations and Cold War and all that, and I'm going to talk about you leading a platoon for a little bit. But most of all, I'll just kind of keep it short. Okay, you're soon going to be called upon to assume the most important duty a young American can perform: leadership of American soldiers. Never forget, that's why you're here. Leadership. It's why the Army has invested so much in your development, in your preparation as an officer. Not for your personal benefit, but for the benefit of America's sons and daughters who you will lead, our greatest treasure, as you lead them in the service of our nation. So what kind of a leader should you be? What will your soldiers expect from you? What standards will they judge you by? And judge you they will. How will you earn their respect and trust? When I was you, I knew a sage observer of many officers during his 22 years of service in the Army. His name was James Townsend, Master Sergeant of Armor, and he was my father. On the eve of my own commissioning, I asked him for some advice to get off to a good start as a new lieutenant in the Army. So he said, okay. He thought about it for a minute, and he said, first, always double knot your shoes. So I was a little perplexed by that. And I said, okay, Dad, why is that? And he said, whenever a soldier falls out of PT formation to tie his shoes, the other soldiers think he can't take the pace and he needs a breather. An officer should never fall out of formation for any reason. So always double knot your shoes. 36 years later, I still double knot my shoes every day at PT. Second, an officer should never run unless conducting PT or under fire. Okay, Dad, why is that? Officers running through the unit area makes the troops nervous. Third, an officer should never, ever talk to themselves, because officers talking to themselves definitely makes the troops nervous. So really, if you remember nothing else tonight, double knot your shoes and never talk to yourselves in the presence of your soldiers. Okay. Though mostly tongue-in-cheek, my father's advice has held me in pretty good stead over the years. If you read between the lines, what's he saying? Be prepared and lead by example. That's what it boils down to. All right, I'm going to focus the rest of my talk tonight with you about soldiering and leadership. I'm going to pass along 4 things I hope you remember, 4 things I believe are the foundation for any successful American officer leading our soldiers, 4 things that I have learned along the way that I hope maybe 1 or 2 of them will stick with you and become part of your own personal leadership philosophy. The first thing is, the most important thing is, keep your honor clean. Live and soldier by the Army values and our warrior ethos. Every decision you make, every action you take needs to be based on a foundation of our Army and national values. An Army officer is a grown-up who is a role model of Army values for your soldiers. Be a person of moral courage and do what's right even when you think no one is looking. And in these days when everyone has a video camera in their pocket and there are surveillance cameras everywhere, when is no one looking? Almost never. Someone's always looking. I once traveled 1,100 miles from my unit to go on vacation. And I thought I would be nowhere around my soldiers. While I was there, 3 of my soldiers came up and introduced themselves to me and said, "Wow, sir, I didn't expect to see you here." I said the same thing. The bottom line is your soldiers are always watching you. The American people and the Army expect this of you. Your soldiers deserve it from you. Soldiering and leading by our Army values is the foundation upon which trust, teamwork, and unit cohesion will be built. In October of 1983, 10 months into my first duty assignment as a platoon leader, and with no advance notice, I found myself headed off to war for the first time. Think about that for a minute. I was sitting in a group just like this. I was a cadet in February of 1982. 20 months later, I was a platoon leader in a combat zone. Like so many of others that have gone before you, you may find yourself leading soldiers in combat sooner rather than later. So, the second thing I want you to remember about leadership is live on amber. What do I mean by live on amber? That's a little memory aid. I mean be ready. Be ready for what? For anything. Stay alert. Always ready to deploy, fight, and win. Keep yourself and your soldiers physically and mentally prepared. Teach them to expect the unexpected. German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had it right when he said the best form of welfare for your troops is tough, realistic training. Make sure your soldiers get what they need before you make sure they get what they might want. You will fight just like you have trained. You do have to practice being miserable in training. Keep your troops informed. American soldiers perform and fight better when they understand the why. This is kind of unique to American soldiers. There's a lot of armies in the world that will just immediately, instantly obey their leaders' orders because that's what they're trained to do. We don't really, well, first of all, Americans aren't really raised that way, and we don't train them that way. They need to know the why, the purpose. That's why you give them the task. If they just wanted to follow orders, you just give them the task. But we give our American soldiers task and purpose, so they understand the why. The why is more important than the task. Bottom line, take care of first things first. Make sure your soldiers are prepared to do their jobs in combat as your first priority. You will need to be an expert at your job. Now, we all know that you'll be new second lieutenants, just starting out. But there's a platoon of soldiers counting on you to know your officer stuff, because you're the only officer in a platoon. You need to know how to do that officer stuff. So hit the field manuals and the unit SOPs and learn what you can. And be a sponge around your leaders, your seniors, your NCOs. Learn as much as you can, as fast as you can. Then make a reputation for being dependable, for getting the job done. When your commander has a tough or important mission, you want them to call on you and your platoon to do it. So be ready. All right, fast forward a few years. And I'm a company commander at the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, California. We're out on our rotation. We've been out in the field for half the rotation. My company was given a mission to conduct a night infiltration to establish an attack by fire position for our battalion's attack. I sent a recon squad out ahead to find a good route to take us to the company attack position. But the recon squad ran into the OP-4, the enemy, ran into an ambush, and they were all killed. So later that night, as we moved to the objective without the benefit of the recon squad's work, we came across the notionally dead squad sitting in the darkness with their helmets off. Well, the OC wasn't around, the observer controller wasn't around, so I quickly chatted with the squad leader to try to get some intel, and I asked him what had happened and if he had everybody accounted for. He could account for all of his soldiers but one. It seems that one squad member had survived the enemy ambush. Corporal Alonzo was his name. Unbeknownst to the officer cadre, the observer controller cadre at the NTC, and they probably would have had an aneurysm if they had known that he had done this, Alonzo picked up the radio, a map and a compass, 2 anti-tank weapons, and wandered off into the darkness by himself. What could go wrong? He was about 6 kilometers short of our objective, and off he went by himself into the darkness, violating every training rule of engagement at the training center. But the observer controllers didn't notice it, and off he went. He was headed out to accomplish the squad's mission. So we were all worried about Alonzo. 6 kilometers later, it's getting dawn. We're approaching our attack position, and there's a ridge line in front of us, and the sun's just coming up. And there I see a silhouette on the ridge line. It's a soldier. He's got a radio and 2 AT-4s on his back. Corporal Alonzo, guiding the company into our attack position. He'd been up all night by himself in the desert, moved 6 kilometers from his last contact with his squad through enemy territory, and was there doing what the squad had been told to do, guide us into position. After the plan had gone terribly wrong. That is an example of the grit and the disciplined initiative of the American soldiers. It's your job to promote that, to unleash that. All right, look at this next picture here. U.S. paratroopers. I think if you looked up the definition of discipline or initiative, were in the dictionary, those two words together. If you looked it up, there'd be a picture, there'd be this picture right there. These guys are ready for anything, and they're the epitome of discipline initiative. They had a plan that they had rehearsed over and over and over again before they parachuted into France at 01 in the morning on June 6, 1944. Then all that plan went right out the frickin' window. They were scattered all over Hell's Half Acre, intermingled with other units, and little groups of paratroopers had to come together in the darkness and make stuff happen. And that's what they did. Disciplined initiative won D-Day. So the third thing about leadership that I want you to remember is that. Act with disciplined initiative. Take decisive action to achieve your commander's intent, even when the initial plan is failing. I want you to develop a command climate in your unit with trust that produces as many Corporal Alonzos as possible. Army leaders give mission orders with a clear commander's intent. This empowers your subordinates to act with disciplined initiative. When they understand what must be accomplished and why, then they understand more. They understand the plan better than understanding just the plan. Your subordinates have to be smart enough to recognize when their plan is failing. They have to be smart enough to come up with a plan that will work. And they have to have the guts enough to do it, even if they're out of communications with you. They need to have a trust and backing up the chain of command to empower that discipline initiative. This is the only way to lead a winning army. To do so, you must lead and train this way every day. The fourth and final thing I want you to remember is this: lead by example. Doing so is as simple as this: just be the leader you want to be led by. Be the leader you want to be led by. Whether you realize it or not, as an officer, you're a role model for your soldiers 24/7. I've already told you there's no such thing really as off duty for you. You must always model what you want your soldiers to be. Get to know your soldiers as people. Keep them informed. Take your work seriously, but not yourself so seriously. Enjoy the journey and have a little fun along the way. Soldiering can be an adventure if you just let it be. If the task before you is hard, if it sucks, if it's risky, you need to be there right there with your soldiers, and you need to be ready to go first and lead them. Look at this photo. That's Omaha Beach, June 6, 1944. Some of the first waves landing on the beach. There were 5 invasion beaches: Gold, Juneau, and Sword, Omaha, and Utah. On 4 of the 5, the invasion was going mostly according to plan. On Omaha, we were failing. That's a picture of Omaha Beach. Raise your hand if you've seen the movie Saving Private Ryan. Okay, good. I'm so happy to see most of you have seen it. Great. Well, if you remember the first 15 minutes or so of the movie, where Tom Hanks is almost drowned coming off the landing craft and blown up, getting onto the shore, and guys are falling all around him. That was Omaha Beach. That's what that scene is. That's what's going on right here in this photograph. So I'm going to tell you the story about Second Lieutenant Francis Bull Dawson. I guess if your first name's Francis and you're a guy, you've got to have a cool nickname like Bull. Bull Dawson was a platoon leader in the 5th Ranger Battalion on Omaha Beach. His platoon had been tasked to breach a place on the beachhead and lead the invasion force off the beach. They'd been landed in the wrong spot. So finally, after several hours, the formation finally got, there was a mined wire obstacle defended by the Germans in depth in front of them. really one of the hardest things to do on the planet for an Army to do. Breach a mind wire obstacle under enemy fire. They were doing that. Finally, when the Bangalore torpedo went off, nobody went. Nobody jumped to their feet and assaulted through. Finally, Second Lieutenant Bull Dawson jumps to his feet with his Thompson submachine gun and said, "Follow me," and ran to the breach. He kept running. He ran up to the top of the bluff. He took out 3 German machine gun positions on the way. His act led the whole invasion force off the beach. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. Now, I bet they rehearsed that thing 25, maybe 50 times in England, maybe more. I'll bet you money not one single rehearsal was Lieutenant Dawson the first person off the beach, because that's not how we do it. When you breach a mind wire obstacle, there's some engineers that go forward. A squad or a platoon of engineers would have breached that obstacle. They would have gone through the gap. They would have secured the far side. Even if Dawson's platoon was their first infantry platoon through, he wouldn't have been the first soldier. There would have been a squad or 2 of sergeants and soldiers that would have gone through before the first officer went through that breach. But on that day, June 6, 1944, when that Bangalore torpedo finally went off, nobody went. Why? They were dead. They were wounded. They were lost. They were scared. They were in the wrong place on the beach. For whatever reason, nobody went. Lieutenant Dawson led the way. So I don't expect you to lead the way every day. There are soldiers and sergeants who are supposed to do that. But there may come a time, your Omaha Beach day may come a time, you got to be ready for that. And you do that by doing that every day in training. You show them the way when you can. At PT with your soldiers. Be at training. Be in the motor pool, especially when it's raining. Be on the range, especially when it's cold. You're in the field with them. They know, they see you. You don't have to be the fastest or the strongest or the baddest ass in the combatives pit. You just got to be scrappy. You got to be fit enough to hang with the platoon. Ideally, you can be fit enough to lead the platoon from the front. That's what you need to be doing. But you got to be scrappy and not give up. And then your soldiers will trust you, and they'll know that when that day comes, you will lead them if you have to. Okay, let me wrap it up. You can be justifiably proud of this recognition that you've achieved, named after one of the greatest soldiers and diplomats our nation has ever produced, George Marshall. I want you to take some time to read about George Marshall. I would suggest to you that the reason he is held in such high esteem, not just here in the United States, but around the world, Winston Churchill referred to George Marshall as the architect of Allied victory in World War II. It's because his entire life of public service, both in uniform and out, exemplified the 4 tenets of leadership that I just talked to you about tonight. America needs its next Second Lieutenant Bull Dawson and its next General George Marshall. Either one's a lofty goal. Your Army needs and your soldiers deserve leaders who soldier and lead by our Army values, who are always mentally and physically ready, who act with disciplined initiative, and who lead by example. That's your charge. That's my message to all of you tonight. Now, we're all proud of you. We've got nothing but the utmost confidence in all of you. You're going to try hard. You're going to make mistakes. You'll learn from them. You'll grow from them. Just strive every day to be a little better, to be a little more ready, and to be the leader that you would like to be led by. If you do that, you'll be just fine. Congratulations again. Believe it or not, I would trade my stars for a chance to start all over again with you. You're on an amazing journey of service and leadership. Good luck, and thank you.